The UFC lightweight division, long feared for chaos and fireworks, suddenly teeters on a razor's edge, locked in a nerve-fraying standstill. The MMA world is crackling with whispers, voices rising, breaths held, as dread tightens its grip. Because looming over everything is one brutal question: is the massively hyped UFC 324 main event, the collision of titans Justin Gaethje and Paddy Pimblett, quietly collapsing behind closed doors? This isn't noise or drama. It's a fault line, and if it snaps, the entire division detonates.
Rumors have been swirling that Justin Gaethje is injured. A few videos have surfaced of him diving and cracking heads with someone, which wobbled him bad. Do you have any inside information?
And here's where it spirals into something even more unhinged, because the entire balance of the promotion's very first flagship card under their massive, brand new Paramount broadcasting agreement suddenly feels like it's standing on a trapdoor, ready to collapse without warning. A true seismic swing triggered by one disturbing visual detail that appeared on Justin Gaethje's neck. A mark so small yet so alarming it detonated instant chaos across the MMA world, sending fans, insiders, and fighters into full-blown meltdown mode as panic surged through social media like a shockwave, erupting the moment images surfaced of the seasoned veteran sporting what countless observers instantly believed, and honestly dreaded, was a staph infection, the kind of nightmare complication that combat sports veterans whisper about with genuine fear because it can derail careers, cancel fights, and wreck entire cards overnight, making the timing for the UFC, already attempting to usher in a bold new era with a blockbuster interim title bout, feel catastrophically cursed, especially when you remember they just locked in a staggering $7.7 billion media rights deal with Paramount and positioned UFC 324 as the grand opening statement of that ultra-lucrative partnership, a showcase meant to scream dominance, not disaster. So the idea of their main event being compromised by a bacterial infection felt like an unthinkable worst-case scenario that absolutely no one, not a single soul, had even imagined days earlier, forcing Gaethje to step in fast as the storm intensified, jumping onto social media to confront the swirling speculation head-on, attempting to slow the panic before it exploded into something irreversible, insisting that the highly visible issue on his neck was nothing more than a healing ingrown hair, harmless, mundane, and nowhere near the terrifying staph infection fans feared, brushing it off with awkward humor as he joked about growing hair now, laughing through their absurdity as,
Yeah, a little brisket on the chin.
Because they said he had herpes on his...
I know, brisket, and I had an ingrown hair, he continued, carrying that same oddly light, almost joking tone, clearly attempting to smother the spark before it reignited the inferno, downplaying the detail that had sent the entire internet into a nervous spiral, assuring everyone again and again that it was nothing more than a minor, everyday annoyance, a meaningless inconvenience, and absolutely not the kind of catastrophic medical emergency that could derail his fight, shatter the card, or validate the fear that had briefly gripped the sport.
Ingrown hair? That's
Yo.
the gnarliest ingrown hair I've ever seen. That makes like a little red dot on your neck if it's an ingrown hair. He had a crater.
But here's what actually pushes this whole situation into far more dangerous territory, the detail that's ignited a deeper, louder, and far more explosive controversy across the entire mixed martial arts world. And no, it isn't the asterisk-riddled medical scare surrounding Gaethje, because as unsettling as that moment was, the real firestorm is centered on the baffling, almost surreal question of who is even fighting for this interim title in the first place, a decision that has left fans arguing non-stop, because Arman Tsarukyan, the undisputed number one ranked contender in the lightweight division, is somehow standing on the outside staring in, frozen out despite doing everything the sport has ever demanded to earn a championship opportunity, and this isn't a case of borderline credentials or questionable momentum, since the Armenian standout hasn't merely been winning, he's stacked up a brutal, undeniable 5-fight winning streak featuring statement victories over elite names like Dan Hooker, Charles Oliveira, and Beneil Dariush, the kind of resume that by every traditional metric, every logical ranking-based standard, should place him directly in the cage fighting for gold, yet instead the opportunity went to the wildly popular Paddy Pimblett, a move many, and yes many, have interpreted as the UFC openly choosing marketability, hype, and fan engagement over pure, unforgiving meritocracy, because while the Liverpool native undeniably carries star power, a massive loyal fan base, and an ability to draw attention, his lightning-fast and unconventional rise to such a monumental moment has left purists, longtime fans, and analysts raising serious concerns about what truly matters anymore, rankings or reach, competition or clicks, and even Pimblett himself seems to grasp the weight of it all, recently admitting he postponed his birthday celebrations until after the fight. A small but revealing detail that underscores just how intense, pressurized, and impossible to IG.
Now, is Armin ready is the thing.
that what he walks out
some
to?
of those videos.
No,
I'm like, oh,
Yo,
Enter Armin.
enter Armin. Walking out there, eating a turkey leg. I mean, come on.
185-pound catch weight.
What a
Honestly,
moment, though. Wouldn't
they
that
could have
kind
a
of be the
fight.
best thing for the UFC?
And then an eating contest.
Yeah. Oh, my God. Him and Paddy, yes.
I'm legitimately, though, I don't think Armin Sarukian could make weight on this short of a time.
Now shifting gears, the situation surrounding Sarakin unfolds as one of the most frustrating, almost maddening chapters of his entire career arc, a storyline overflowing with brutal what-ifs and lingering resentment, because he was once firmly locked in to face none other than Islam Makhachev for the undisputed lightweight championship back in January of the previous year. The kind of once-in-a-lifetime opportunity fighters chase their entire lives, only for everything to collapse during fight week when an untimely injury forced him to withdraw, a moment that didn't just steal a title shot but detonated a chain reaction of consequences far more damaging than the immediate heartbreak, as UFC President Dana White made it painfully clear that Sarakin, at least in his eyes, had squandered the opportunity and would now be required to claw his way back into contention from scratch. A punishment many viewed as excessively harsh given that the withdrawal stemmed from a legitimate, verified injury rather than any lapse in professionalism or misconduct, and even when Sarakin stormed back into action and violently dismantled Dan Hooker in just 2 rounds last November, a statement performance that screamed championship readiness, White shockingly doubled down, insisting there was still more work to be done before another title shot could even be discussed, a stance that has left veteran observers genuinely baffled, including Daniel Cormier, the UFC Hall of Famer and former 2-division champion, who has openly and passionately questioned the logic behind keeping Sarakin away from championship competition, even suggesting that the Armenian fighter may very well be the best lightweight on the planet right now, especially with Makhachev having moved up in weight, firmly believing that Sarakin and Ilia Topuria are the 2 most skilled forces in the division, and that their inevitable collision, a true clash of elite talent, is absolutely necessary to determine who truly sits alone.
Best guys in the world. I think they need a fight at some point because I think Paddy Pimblett is awesome. Justin Gaethje is awesome. Armin and Ilya seem to have something, and not only something in terms of skill, but between the two that we could build a great fight around, right? So yeah, I think Armin's fantastic though, man. He's good. He looked great against Dan Hooker too.
In your opinion, why UFC is not giving Arman a title fight?
I don't know. I don't know why Armin's not fighting for a title. I really don't. I've heard the reason because of what happened in Los Angeles. I thought that by weighing in as the backup fighter when Ilya fought Charles, and then by going and fighting Charles Oliveira or Dan Hooker, it would be okay. I don't know. I don't know what the conversations that they're having behind closed doors are, because they're telling him something that's making him okay with it, right? Because if he wasn't okay with it, he would be more loud about him not getting his opportunity. Yeah. So I kind of defer to, they know more than we do, and so we got to kind of accept it for what it is, because it seems like Armin is doing that too.
However, it isn't all doom and despair for Sarukian, because beneath the frustration and stalled momentum, influential voices within the sport are quietly suggesting that his road back to redemption has already begun, with outspoken former UFC analyst Shail Sonnen leading that charge, firmly maintaining that the wheels are already in motion even if most fans haven't noticed yet, as Sonnen points to a crucial detail many overlooked: the fact that Sarukian recently stepped in as the official backup for a prior title fight and went through the grueling, unforgiving process of cutting weight for that role, a move Sonnen interprets as the UFC's subtle but unmistakable signal of restored trust, almost a silent act of forgiveness for the injury withdrawal that once derailed everything. And when you factor in the brutal timing of events, the picture becomes even more complex, with Sarukian competing in late November while the entire title landscape rapidly reshaped itself around a January card, creating a turnaround window so tight and logistically chaotic that it may have been impossible to align all the pieces in time, leaving opportunity just out of reach despite his readiness. Yet through all of this, Sonnen remains unwaveringly confident, almost prophetic, insisting that Sarukian's very next appearance will be for championship gold, not another proving ground, not another delay, but the real thing, the only mystery still hanging in the air being when that long-awaited, hard-earned moment will finally arrive under the brightest lights on the sport's grandest stage.
Agreement by all, we're good. I believe that. Some people say, then Chael, why isn't he fighting for the belt? Well, I'll tell you why. He got put in what was known as a #1 contenders match in November. But that was supposed to draw into Ilya, who then says he's not going to be present, and they decide they're going to contest the title in January. So that would be a turnaround for Sarukian from November to January. And it's just very quick. I think that Sarukian's next fight is going to be for the title. That may end up being interim. That may, right? I mean, it's one of these. It's one of these things. It's one of these things that's got some moving parts. We don't all know yet what an interim belt is. We don't know. We largely agree as a community that at a minimum, an interim belt makes you the #1 contender for the undisputed belt. But when we saw that Aspinall had to wait as the interim champion, we found out that that wasn't completely right. So, but hear me out, because we would think that Paddy Gaethje, if Ilya returns, we then got to go do that match. That could delay the championship opportunity of Sarukian, but that's not because of a penance. You see the difference? Like we would have to do that. That wouldn't be a penance to Arman. We would have to give the interim champion the undisputed.
But take a step back and really absorb the bigger picture here, because UFC 324 itself is stacked with other dangerously compelling matchups that many passionate fans and sharp-eyed analysts argue deserve for more spotlight than they are currently getting, and once you notice it, it's impossible to ignore, because the co-main event alone features Kayla Harrison, a bona fide superstar, putting her title on the line against the legendary Amanda Nunes, a collision between two of the most dominant female fighters the sport has ever produced, a fight soaked in legacy, consequence, and history, and even Sean Ali, the ever-confident Sugar Show figurehead, stepped into the conversation, admitting that while he fully understands the massive promotional pull and undeniable marketability behind Pimblett versus Gaethje, the Harrison-Nunes showdown carries a level of historical gravity that could absolutely justify headlining the card outright, and when you peel back the layers of this lineup, the structure of the event starts to reveal something deeper, a familiar but unresolved tension that has followed the UFC for years, the relentless tug-of-war between competitive merit, elite skill, and hard-earned achievement versus the cold realities of commercial appeal and raw drawing power, and hovering over all of it is the unshakable truth many refuse to let go of, that Arman Sarukian remains, by nearly every rational metric imaginable, the rightful #1 contender, a fact that only sharpens the controversy and adds yet another volatile layer to an already fascinating, uneasy dilemma.
Decided to go the route of Paddy Pimblett versus Justin Gaethje. Tell me this, how does Justin Gaethje go from getting knocked out by a featherweight to beating a #12 ranked Rafael Fiziev to now getting an interim title shot? Paddy Pimblett kind of made sense just because of the amount of hype he has, but then Justin Gaethje, yes, he's a big name, but he's been doing absolutely nothing but threatening to retire if he doesn't get a title shot. They obviously didn't want Justin Gaethje to retire, and they obviously didn't want to feed Paddy Pimblett to Arman Sarukian, and then they also didn't want to give Arman Sarukian the next title shot. So an interim title between Paddy Pimblett and Justin Gaethje makes the most sense for them apparently. If you had told me after that Jared Gordon fight that Paddy Pimblett would be 3 fights away from getting a title shot, bro, I would have crashed out. Look at Paddy Pimblett's last few wins. Bobby Green, who was on a 1-fight win streak, and then he beat Tony Ferguson, who was on like a 20-fight losing streak, and then he beat
Love you. Come on now, because that's the kind of casual, almost cheeky commentary that always seems to follow these training camp revelations, and in this case it's all about Paddy Pimblett, because some genuinely fascinating subplots have started to emerge from his camp, the kind of behind-the-scenes drama that fans absolutely devour. And one particularly notable moment occurred when Pimblett entered a King of the Mat grappling tournament at his home gym, Next Generation MMA, where, in a twist that surprised everyone, he was submitted by a calf slicer for the first time in 5 years, a moment captured in footage that quickly spread online, showing his opponent, skilled grappler Aaron Jordan, smoothly sweeping Pimblett's leg from guard and transitioning into a position where he could apply crushing pressure with his shin against Pimblett's calf until the tap finally came, and while some people might immediately jump to conclusions, viewing this as a genuinely concerning warning sign heading into such a high-stakes title fight, the more experienced observers see something very different, recognizing it as evidence of a fighter who is pushing himself to the absolute edge in training, willingly placing himself in difficult, compromising positions because that's where real improvement happens, sharpening the sword even if it means getting cut sometimes, because true champions aren't built by avoiding danger, they are built by walking straight through it. Adding even more depth to this already highly anticipated showdown, several former fighters have stepped in with their own unique perspectives on the matchup, and one particularly insightful take came from Eddie Alvarez, a seasoned veteran who, in a twist of irony, handed Justin Gaethje his very first UFC loss, and drawing from that first-hand experience, Alvarez zeroed in on the one preparation challenge that could truly define the fight for Pimblett, refusing to soften the message as he emphasized that Gaethje brings a relentless intensity and suffocating pressure that simply cannot be recreated in any normal training environment, because the sheer chaos and constant collision that defines Gaethje's highlight reel style requires a very specific, almost specialized type of preparation, and this is where Alvarez's warning becomes especially chilling, suggesting that if Pimblett trains in his usual comfortable environment with familiar partners who, frankly, don't consistently push at that elite-level intensity, he could end up completely overwhelmed, even blindsided, the moment he experiences that unprecedented pressure for the first time inside the actual fight, with the implication being crystal clear. Attempting to adjust on the fly to Gaethje's relentless, unyielding approach in the heat of battle is the kind of critical mistake that often leads to early, definitive finishes in the octagon, a high-stakes gamble with almost no margin for error.
8 years ago, what's like the first thing that comes to mind when you think of that fight with Justin?
That I'm glad it's over and I never want to do it again. I'm like, the fans don't ever ask for a rematch or anything like that, because that would have never. I'm like, I'm glad. He's unique, man, and he's one of my favorite guys to watch. So like, but if you want to beat Justin Gaethje, you have to. So he's a forward fighter and a pressure fighter that he will stand in the pocket. And he's gonna throw everything he got in that pocket. If you don't meet him, you'll get chewed up. So Paddy, the way to beat a guy who like does this, very violent, aggressive pressure fighter, you have to meet him. You have to throw when he throws. So you got to be brave, and you got to go. You have to go when he goes in between his shots. If you do that, you got a fair shot. If you don't do that, if you're not brave and courageous and throw when he throws in between his shots, it's going to be a really long night. It's going to be a hard night.
Meanwhile, another respected voice in the community, Matt Brown, offered a much broader, almost philosophical perspective on what UFC 324 and specifically the interim title fight truly represents for the sport as a whole, and his frustration ran deep, fueled by the idea that Pimblett's sudden leap into an interim title fight feels less like a genuine reward for methodically defeating a string of top contenders and more like a transparent promotional calculation, a cold business decision based almost entirely on sheer popularity, because Brown, having witnessed the UFC's matchmaking evolution over many years, saw this situation as a perfect example of a troubling shift within the organization. A trend where easily quantifiable metrics like ticket sales and social media engagement now seem to carry far more weight than the hard-earned accomplishments fighters achieve inside the cage, and his commentary, delivered with a sharp, almost biting edge of sarcasm, jokingly hinted that title shots might soon be handed out based on online influence or viral moments, but beneath the humor lay a real, palpable concern that the sport, its very essence, could be slowly drifting away from its foundational meritocratic principles, risking integrity for short-term gains, and if that shift continues, the future of mixed martial arts might be defined not by who is truly the best, but by who is simply the most marketable.
Like, they're just basically saying Paddy's more popular, you're getting it over Armin.
Yeah, it's kind of sad, right? And that's, I mean, God, I hate like how I kind of get into this too much, but I mean that's really like that's the definition of a monopoly where a single promoter owns the title and the rankings, and it's not a good thing for the sport in my opinion. And I have to question what it's going to do for the longevity of the sport. I don't think in the short term it's really going to make a big difference, right? Like, it's going to sell the next fight, right? It's going to sell the next pay-per-view. But trends tend to come and go, right? Fads tend to come and go. At some point, like, to have staying power and lasting power, I think it requires, a meritocracy-based system. It's going to require, some, if you want to bring in guys like Arman Tsarukyan or Movsar Evloev, I always mess up how I say his name. You want to bring in these Olympic wrestling level guys. I mean, they don't want to have to go out there and put on some ridiculous show to become a champion. They don't want to have to go on Instagram and start a podcast and make whatever kind of skits on social media and this silly kind of stuff. Like, they just want to be a world champion because they want to be the best athlete. And that's what makes me wonder how the staying power is going to be, right? When you're dealing with guys that are, legitimate athletes that want to be legitimate athletes, and they're getting passed up by guys that are.
So now we come full circle, with Justin Gaethje's neck injury scare suddenly throwing everything into question, because the entire structure of UFC 324 now faces a potential upheaval, a genuine shakeup that could redefine the event in ways no one could have predicted. And if, for any reason, the main event cannot proceed as planned, the UFC would be forced to confront a deeply uncomfortable reality, one that would leave them with no choice but to act, because logic in that scenario would loudly dictate that Arman Tsarukyan, the very fighter they controversially passed over for the title shot, would instantly become the most obvious, the most sensible, and arguably the only viable replacement option. And the irony of such a turn of events would be profound, almost poetic, as a mere medical issue, like a staph infection scare, could inadvertently correct what many passionate fans and sharp observers already view as a fundamentally flawed matchmaking decision, turning the backup plan that felt unfair and unjust into the exact main event the fan base wanted, the one they believed they deserved all along, creating a twist of fate that could reshape not only the card but the entire narrative of fairness within the UFC, exposing how quickly the story can flip when the sport's most fragile element, health, enters the equation.